We're going to have a public service announcement this morning, and it could well be that this 331 phone number might be that person. I don't know. I'm looking for Brian Norris. So Brian, if and when you show up, please speak up, or if somebody sees Brian's name. But you all may be aware that we got a cold front coming. I'm sure there's a song that can go with that, but we've got a cold front coming. And before we hear that public service announcement, I'm wondering if you are not on the urgent action alert auto texting system, if you might consider being on that auto texting system. I'm about to invite you into it, and now I can't remember the number to put in. I'm not very good at this, right? But the auto texting system we set up, it came out of the faith-based initiative, out of the work we've all been doing. And it's, again, an auto texting system. If you're a part of it and you're logged into it, you will get small text on your phone. You probably get notices like that already. I get them from my auto bill pay on my telephone, for example. But I also get notices, other notices from the city. But the one that we have through our network is about human needs, especially urgent needs or actions that kind of need to happen pretty quick. And in the past and still, when there are needs out there, especially very urgent human needs, we all want to help, and we have stepped up. And sometimes we overstep because we don't know exactly what's needed. So we may end up with tons, literally, of used clothing that end up sometimes being plowed under in landfill because it's not needed and there aren't volunteers to sort through it. Anyway, we've really gotten so much better at it as a city that we're able to send out these action alerts. They send you to a link, and you click on that link, and as briefly and concisely as we possibly can, we note the who, what, when, where, and what is needed and why, along with a human contact that you can call if you have questions, somebody who really knows about what that is and not an in-between person. And so if water is needed, if a hurricane happens, if snowvid happens, and anyway, Brian Norris is here. What is happening? And so while Brian is telling us about the public service announcement, and with this cold coming, I'm going to find that number. And so anybody who's not a part of that auto texting system, you can become a part of it this morning. You can always opt out. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. If you end up being annoyed with it, you just opt out, and that's that. So Brian, I've kind of told them a little bit about just all of us stepping up in those times, and that you're going to be talking to us about the cold front and a specific need that emergency management has right now. It's all yours, Brian.
Yeah, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I know we've been talking a long time about the resiliency projects for the city and our plans moving forward. And there's an opportunity right now to utilize different groups out there for the good of our citizens and residents. And so one thing that we're looking for. So first of all, let me start off. We do have a cold snap coming. I know y'all have been watching the news. I don't know if you've ever worked with the National Weather Service, but pinning them down on what's actually going to happen is a very difficult task. And so things are constantly changing. And every time I look at the weather forecast, it just gets colder and colder. And so with that, we realize that in San Antonio, we have extremes in weather. We have extreme heat to where we need to provide places for people just to cool off. And one of the things that I've been fighting for is that we shouldn't just be isolated to city facilities. And so if you need to stay cool and go to a mall, you need to stay cool and go to a library, or you need to stay cool and go to a faith-based organization or somewhere like that, you should be able to do it. However, one thing that we do have the ability to do through the city is publicize those locations. So if people are truly in need and they don't understand where they can go just to stay cool, then we're going to provide them a listing of that. The same is true for cold temperatures. We need places to where people can just go to stay warm. And so the city provides a list of what we call daytime warming centers. We publicize that list on a map on the Office of Emergency Management website. And so with this opportunity and this cold snap coming out, what we're really looking for is to expand the number of places that we have where people can just go stay warm. And so I talked to Ann yesterday. I think there's an opportunity here to merge that with the plans that we're having in developing this resiliency plan citywide, that if any of you would be willing to just have your doors open, if you're going to be open Monday through Friday and people are welcome into your facility, then just let us know those hours and we'll publicize it on our website. What we have done over time for the libraries and parks and rec locations and senior centers is given them the ability to access the system and update their hours on their own. So we're still working towards that for outside entities. However, there is an opportunity with this cold snap, and to be perfectly honest with you, with Martin Luther King Day coming up on Monday, a lot of city facilities are going to be closed. So that's going to eat into the opportunities that we have for people to go to places to stay warm. And it's going to be really cold on Monday. And so we are going to be staffing some. We have a plan in place to look around the city and offer some places. But if your buildings are going to be open to the public, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is when we're really looking at it's going to be cold. It's turning out it may push back into Sunday. Then we would love to have those hours that we can publicize on our website. The only thing that I ask is that if you tell us you're going to be open those hours, just make sure that you're actually open those hours so people can go. Because the one thing we don't want to do is provide a place that we're telling you, hey, you can go here and be warm, and then the doors are locked. And so we just want to transmit honest information to our residents and those that are in need. So daytime hours. We're not asking for anything overnight. That'll be part of the community hub project that we work towards in the future, because once we get into congregate sheltering and people staying overnight, there's a whole new list of things that move forward. However, if you're going to be open during the day and your facility is open to having people there just sitting and trying to stay warm, then we would ask that you give us your information, and we'll be happy to publicize that and start some resiliency in our communities. I have forwarded Ann a template spreadsheet that she can, and we have our point of contact at the EOC that's on that email, Ann, and he's our GIS lead that's over there, and we'll get those plugged in. In the future, we're going to move towards that other system to where you can update it yourself, but for this one, we're going to have to hard key it in there just so it shows up on the website. But with that, quick and simple, I truly appreciate you, Ann. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And if y'all have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Why don't we put those questions into chat so we can move on? Brian, if you would also put your email in the chat.
Sure.
And if you're able to stay on a little bit, people could connect with you now through chat.
That'd be great.
I did put into chat, I found out what you need to do, everyone, to be a part of that auto texting system. So you just simply use your phone like you always do when you're going to do a text. Only the phone number that you put in is 73224. It's in the chat. And then in the text where you'd actually put in the message, you write the word compassion and you'll be added into that system. So thank you, Brian, and thank you all for considering doing this in your organizations, congregations, and to help our community in need. So I want to introduce this morning one of the most patient people we've had in this intersection process, Jan Puckett, who's a Buddhist here in our community. And I did send out a short bio on her yesterday. She's also going to be presenting during Dream Week at a community conversation of faith leaders on compassion. That's January 25th, a Wednesday at 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Alamo College's administrative building on Alamo. So you can find that at Dream Week, but she'll be joined by Wahida Kara, Rajam Ramamurthy, and Emma Alexander. And we're going to have a conversation about compassion from the different traditions and what that means in terms of engaging community together here in San Antonio. So Jan, thank you so much for bearing with me, especially, but for being with us this morning. And I know you just came back from Vietnam not long ago, but if you could begin sharing with us, from the Buddhists, within the Buddhist tradition, what are the teachings around healing? And we've just really have been exploring like collective trauma, collective healing, but from our faith and spiritual community, what are those things that we could be learning from each other?
Okay. Thank you, Anne, and thank you for inviting me to speak today about Buddhism and healing. And thank you all for coming today. I remember, Anne, when you sent me the email asking if I would do this, you said, you may want to say something about ease of suffering. And I thought, yes, that's it. That's what Buddhism is a lot about. It's concerned with suffering and the causes of suffering. And the Buddha's first teaching was about that very topic. The first teaching was called the Four Noble Truths, and it was about suffering, the causes of suffering, how to end it, and the path to lead to its cessation. So alleviation of suffering and really healing are an important aspect of the Buddhist teachings. When you asked several of us, I did listen to all of the talks, watch the talks that were recorded, because I was in Vietnam last month for a couple of weeks and couldn't attend all of them. But you asked, what does healing mean and what does it look like from your perspective? So I looked up the definition of healing, and it said the root comes from the word Haelan, Haelan, which means the condition or state of being whole, hal or whole. So to heal means to make sound or whole, or to restore to a condition of wholeness. And this is very much in alignment with the Buddhist teachings. What the question that this definition brings up is what prevents us from being whole? And that may be one of the most important spiritual questions that we can ask ourselves. And previous speakers have spoken of this, and there are certain universal themes that I see and a lot of resonance with Buddhist teachings. So I'd like to kind of talk about that a little bit. But before I do, I want to read a quote by one of my teachers, Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, that I know, Anne, you've met him. He's been coming to San Antonio every year for the last 30 years to teach a weekend retreat. In the early days, it was a week long, but it's been weekend lately because he's been very busy. But on the topic of healing, this is what he says. The Buddhist idea of healing is that through a wide variety of methods, we try to get back to our original state of innate health. If there's nothing innately healthy, then there's nothing to restore. If there's no original health, then what is there to bring back? Healing is not about fixing anything or patching something up. Rather, we try to reawaken the potential and the power of the genuine state of our subtle elements and Buddha nature. So I want to unpack that a little bit too. Reawaken the potential and the power of the genuine state of our subtle elements and Buddha nature. So what I remember when we talk about this healing that's innately present is during the pandemic year, I broke my wrist. And I was very aware of this because I had to do rehab so much on my own all day long, pretty much. But the bone will heal itself. There's nothing I have to do to make that bone heal. As long as you present the proper conditions, like you can't have the ends too far apart. If you bring the ends close together and you don't move them so you don't break the connections, it will heal on its own, provide conditions like immobilization, nutrition, and care, and some therapy, and it's going to heal by itself because that's this original state. The bone is going to come back and heal itself. So some of these common themes that I heard from the previous speakers is internal and external balance. and how they're interdependent. So going back to this topic of suffering and its causes, when we're not in a state of wholeness, we suffer, is what Buddhism says. So, and why do we move away from this state of wholeness? Is it some kind of evil force, or, is it random, or why? So Buddhism says that the reason we're disconnected from wholeness is because of ignorance. And you can say ignorance is not knowing, or you could also think of it as not paying attention, and ignoring is another way. And what is it that we're not knowing or not recognizing? And it is our true nature, the true nature of our mind, the true nature of reality, which in Buddhism we talk about Buddha nature. Buddha nature and true nature are synonymous. So what do we mean by that? And what do we mean by ignorance? So what the main ignorance, the main mistake, the big mistake, is that we regard ourselves as an unchanging, unitary, and independent self. And it's separate from everything else in the universe. That's the mistake. I'm over here, you're over there. And so what's happened is that the ego has fabricated this mistaken sense of self by combining a bunch of stuff, what in Buddhism is called aggregates, because they're little parts. And these mean, when we talk about aggregates, we refer to our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts, emotions, consciousness, and we just kind of bunch it together in one thing, like a solid thing that we call me, I, myself. So instead of thinking of our experience as just a flow of experience, like a river, we grasp onto this sense that we're one thing, we're static, we're independent of everybody else. But the true nature of reality and actuality is that we're not disconnected individual beings, but we're interconnected, we're interdependent, or you could even say coextensive with the rest of reality, not only with other humans with whom we have relationships, but also with animals, bugs, plants, with everything, all the elements, what we breathe, what we take in, what we put out. We're not separate from any of those elements that comprise our universe. And in Buddhist tradition, we talk about 5 elements. Earth, we start from the most coarse to the most subtle. So earth is the most coarse, and then water, fire, air, and space. Space being the most subtle. So there's a constant flow and balance between the internal and external elements. So briefly, we just give a little example. For example, earth element, we're made of the same components. All of our physical components are the same as the components of the universe that make up our universe. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, all of these minerals, all of these different things are the same that are in us, and it's constantly in flux. So you can say we're literally made of stardust, right? Because that's where we came from. So that's the earth element. The water element, our body is about 60% water, and this water that's flowing through our body is in a constant flux. We're drinking water or coffee or tea or whatever, and then, we let it out. It goes out into the rivers and the oceans, and then, that evaporates, becomes rain, comes back down, we drink it again. So there's this constant flux of the water element. As for fire element, fire is like energy and heat. So the sun is the primary source of the heat and energy of our world. And this energy is converted to food in our plants, which we ingest. That becomes our energy and heat that we use, or we eat an animal that has consumed the plants. So all of that energy comes from the sun. So this fire element is also in constant flux. Also, when we breathe in, we're breathing in kind of cool air. We breathe out, we're letting out heat. It's never a static situation. As for the air element, you could say it's movement, not just of our breath, but any kind of movement in our body and in our bodily systems. The nutrients are moving through our body. Our blood is moving constantly. Our breath is moving in and out. So this is this constant flow and motion. And even within the atom itself, everything is moving inside it, all those subatomic particles. And then the fifth element, the most subtle, is space. And space is what allows everything to be present. If there were no space, nothing could be in there, right? So the space, which is boundless and without end, accommodates everything. And if you look at the atoms that comprise our body, we're mostly space as well, if you look at the subatomic levels. So Buddhism has this sense of internal balance and external balance, and this is very much in common with the indigenous traditions. I was listening to Linda Jimenez and what she was saying about the elements internal and external. I thought, this is very similar to what Buddhist tantras talk about. So the Buddhist tantras are, you could say, are the mystical tradition, and kind of connecting to a deeper reality, you could say. So these tantras say that when we don't recognize and value this interdependence, that's when there's problems. That's when there's disharmony. And this disharmony affects the world on many levels. So you could say it harms us individually on a physical and mental level. But as this disharmony also spreads, it's like concentric circles, so that our relationship with our families, with other humans in our community, that becomes strained. Relations between nations, to where they're fighting, their wars, and on a greater scale, the environment itself becomes unstable. And you could say, what are some of the effects of environmental disharmony? You could say, well, like global warming, earthquakes, fires, droughts, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, all of that disharmony comes from this internal and external unbalanced disharmony, you could say. And because we're connected to everything and everyone, we do have a capacity to affect this. If we bring peace to ourselves, to our minds, to our hearts, if we express loving kindness and compassion to others without any kind of, preference, you could say with equanimity, this will positively affect our world and our environment. And this is an important aspect of what meditation practice is about. You bring peace to yourself, you extend that, and then in this way you bring peace and harmony to the world as well. So this was talking about internal and external balance and interdependence. The second thing that I wanted to talk about, that I've found also in common with some of our previous speakers, are the rituals and practices to restore innate health. So Buddhism has many different kinds of meditation practice that bring us back to centeredness, to wholeness, to our true nature. And all meditation practices, you could say, are basically about that, about restoring wholeness or healing, or to come to recognize our true nature. So how do we do this? So every meditation practice involves cultivating mindfulness or attentional balance, being able to direct your mind where it wants to go, so it's not totally, distracted and can't pay attention to what's present. And then emotional balance, which comes through attentional balance as well, and also the skill of self-reflection, which brings us emotional balance. Knowing what's going on in our body, what's going on in our stream of thoughts, our emotions, seeing the changeable nature of that, seeing how that affects us, how it affects our mind, how it affects our body, and how it affects our relationships with people, how it colors our perceptions of what's going on. So if we develop this attentional and emotional balance, it will stabilize our mind, and we can discern more clearly how we can best serve. How can we become more resourced and more able to engage in a skillful and effective way? So meditation brings about healing on all levels: physical, mental, and emotional, and spiritual. So also wanted to talk about, I just remembered Marcia Weiser's, Marcia Weiser's Jewish song. And the Tibetan tradition also has a tradition of what are called dohas. Dohas are songs of realization. And it's a kind of a practice as well. And you can hear Tibetan lamas singing a lot of times in verse while they're strolling or walking. And I just remember a story of one of my teachers, Khenpo Tsoktrem Gyamtso Rinpoche, who was always teaching in song. And there was a New York Times article one time about somebody who had, she was a journalist, who had cancer, and she was very depressed. She was young, she'd lost all her hair, and she was went to this monastery in upstate New York to try to just, get her head together, so to speak. And she said, I saw this Lama, he was just singing and singing and singing. And so I went over to him and asked him, why are you singing and such? And he said, well, why are you, so depressed? And I said, well, I've got cancer. And he says, well, that's great. That's the best news, because now you can look at your life and you can see what's important in your life and direct your life in a way that you want to. So these songs also have this kind of pure view or pure perception. And I think for me also, when you sing something, it's easier to remember. It's sort of like nursery rhymes that people with dementia still can sing and remember, even though they can't remember anything else about their past. So the singing of dohas is another kind of a practice, singing of these songs. And there are also practices in the Tibetan tradition where there's I guess you would say it utilizes imagination and visualization. And one such practice that is particularly good for healing is called the Medicine Buddha practice. And this statue here is that of the Medicine Buddha. He's blue in color, representing space and the boundless quality of our true nature. And basically, in the Tibetan tradition, there are a lot of these images that one can practice with, and they're not supposed to be thought of as truly existent deities. They're a manifestation of our own qualities, the true nature of our mind. So what are these qualities? They're loving kindness, compassion, healing, equanimity, joy. All of these one visualizes within oneself and then extends that to all sentient beings in the universe. So you can do this practice for a particular individual who's ill, or I happen to have broken my wrist 1 week after Ponlop Rinpoche gave a teaching on Medicine Buddha, so I was doing this practice for myself as well. This was in 2020, and I found it extremely helpful and able to connect with that, especially in my state of kind of feeling broken at that time. And then the third thing, I'm sorry, I'm kind of running a little long, but a third thing that I wanted to talk about is equanimity, which is very important. Dr. Ramamurthy made this statement when she was speaking: the journey must continue even when we encounter difficult situations, and also that we need to accept our aging and death. So it's normal for us to age and die, right? I mean, it's normal for us to be ill, and yet when we become ill, we think, oh, there's something wrong, I got to fix this. It's of the nature of physical things to come apart. Whatever is composed of parts are all going to fall apart. All things, all parts wear out, right? Car parts wear out. They all have an expiration date, and our body is like that. We have an expiration date. Certain things expire, they just don't work anymore. So there's no need to dread these things. So equanimity also involves acceptance of aging and illness and death, and whatever may come up in the next moment. Whatever comes up, you learn to accept it. This is what's here. I don't have to change it. I'll deal with it the best I can. And in this way, it's easier also to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. When you become ill, you become aware of other people who have suffering in that way. You know, ever since I broke my wrist, and it was such a difficult thing, you know, because your wrist is so requires so many movements, and I would hear something about on TV about someone was shot in the chest and his wrist, and I'd say, not his wrist. You know, it's like you really empathize with something that you've yourself experienced, right? So being able to accept these situations, say, well, this is how it is, and let me see what I can do with that. And then the last thing is the importance of compassion. And you said, what are you doing with your community now for healing? And this is a really important question I think we should ask ourselves all the time. As you mentioned, you know, we have individual trauma as well as collective and community trauma. And when I went to Vietnam for 2 weeks this past month, it just brought back a ton of memories from the Vietnam War, because, you know, I was a teenager at that time or into college. And we visited some of these awful tunnels where the Viet Cong lived and fought, and they lived there for years. They had their families there. And we also went to the War Remnants Museum of Saigon, and you see how the Vietnamese experienced that. I was only, you know, familiar with how the Americans experienced it, but it was very, very painful, heartbreaking experience to see what had been done in Vietnam and for how long it had been done, even before the Americans were involved in warfare there. So what can we do, you know, in a situation like that of collective and community trauma? Sometimes all you can do is bear witness, you know, hold the space, be with what's there, and bearing witness. I know some people in our group couldn't go through it, and I felt like it was really important to see and bear witness to the suffering, and it can mean a lot to another person when you do that. So we know how to stay engaged with community, how important that is, and the opportunities to serve, to be aware of that, especially for those people who feel disconnected or lonely. And I think that's what we're all doing here. And I think it's wonderful to be with this group. And I think it's really amazing what Anne is doing here with our intersection group. When we're together like this, you know, we have so many different ways of learning from each other, and through joining our hands and our energies, I think we become stronger and more able to serve and be of benefit. So thank you.
Thank you, Jan. We're going to take a little pause here. And Jan, you might want to look in chat. There's some chatting going on, and you can look at that and we can pick it up. But I want to thank everyone who's been here this morning. I make this commitment out of compassion that we get the gist of everything before 8:30, and we've done that. And if you need to move on with your day, feel free to do that. And thank you for being with us. Next week, we're going to be hearing from two among us. One is going to be sharing with us a local story within our community. And another one is going to share with us a global story and our connection from within this community. But we're going to look at these two stories, these two examples, and talk about, all of us, what we've heard from our different faith and spiritual traditions in terms of healing in these current examples. So we're going to work with it a little bit next week. So I'm really excited about that. And these are things that I don't want to give too much away. I want to build some excitement, but they're important stories to all of us. And so I'm looking forward to that next week. Doug is going to be bringing the local story, and Sister Martha Ann is going to be bringing our global story. So please join us next week as we look together and utilize our interdependence and our common humanity and what we've learned about each other. So we're going to move on, and we'll stay open until 8:45 so people can gauge. If you're able to stay with us, that's great. So Jan, and then we'll just go to the question. A lot of what I was so glad that you went into equanimity, because that was going to be one of my questions. Say more about equanimity, you know, and because it's such an important word, but so much of what you discussed, if you go into any, you know, compassion education or training, common humanity, interdependence, meditation, equanimity, these are all practices and skill sets within those forms of education and training. So there's a lot of connection there. So I don't know if you want to say more about that, but I know you had a question in the chat. So why don't we go there first, and then we can move forward.
Okay, so I'll answer this question about my career as anesthesiologist. How was Buddhist thinking helpful to your career as an anesthesiologist? Were there contradictions that you needed to consider? So I think anesthesiology is one of those careers where you have to be mindful every second, because anything can happen in any moment unexpectedly. And you've got to remain pretty calm, because a lot of times when there's, you know, a lot of blood loss, or patient's blood pressure is going down, an emergency, C-section, whatever, everybody in the room is moving around and there's a lot of tension, and someone has to hold the space. And if I'm freaking out, everybody's going to freak out too. So I always felt like this is my time to really, you know, try to stay calm. If I can't be panicking because the blood pressure is going down and the patient's about to die, it's my responsibility, right? So I think being a Buddhist really helped with that. My main reason for wanting to go into anesthesiology initially was because it had to do with pain and alleviation of pain. And, you know, it seemed to me that there wasn't a lot I could do about some of the pain in the world, but anesthesiology, at least I could take care of this pain. So that was my original drive to go into anesthesia. Plus it was fascinating and interesting and immediate, and I really liked the practice of anesthesia. But I think it was good for me in both ways, in learning to be calm and have equanimity in the face of, you know, chaos, was good for my Buddhist practice as well. So thank you, Paul, for that question. Yeah, and then the question about equanimity. So there's a Buddhist magazine called Tricycle Magazine that is really good, and I'm this past week, the whole week was devoted to equanimity. There are these what's called the 4 boundless states, or the 4 immeasurable states, and they're the way they're listed are loving kindness, compassion, joy, so sympathetic joy, and equanimity. But in actual practice, you have to start with equanimity, because the sense of equanimity, it's got several aspects to it. One is that you have equanimity regardless of what's happening around you. That you know, if someone comes and is yelling at you and they hate you and they're, you know, treating you badly, versus someone coming and singing your praises, you try to stay even with that, you know, and not be elated because someone's saying nice things about you, and not, you know, be angry at somebody because they're saying bad things, because this is going to happen to you all your life. You know, some people aren't going to like it that you think a certain way, and other people love it that you think a certain way. So having this sense of equanimity, no matter what the next moment may present, and not wishing for it to be otherwise, not wishing that someone would like you better or whatever, but just accepting that and being with that is one aspect of equanimity. The other one is to, you know, is to have equanimity towards all people and all beings, without thinking, oh, this person is worthy of my love and this person is not worthy of my love. This person is worthy of my compassion. This person is not worthy of my compassion. I want this person to be happy and I don't want this person to be happy because he doesn't deserve it. You know, that sort of sense of judgment is evened out with equanimity. And when you can even that out, then it's more easy for you to express and to bring out these qualities that are innate of the loving kindness and compassion. So you have to start with equanimity when you practice these boundless states. And then you go loving kindness, being wishing others happiness and the causes of happiness, and the compassion being wishing others not to suffer and to have not the causes of their suffering. And if they're happy, you want them to have boundless, endless joy at all times. So yeah, so equanimity is crucial. Yeah, that stability of equanimity.
I don't know if we have a lot of conversation around equanimity in our dominant culture, and when I get into, I don't know, meetings or things, even the two words equality and equity, there's usually at least one person in the room where they're like, well, what does that mean? And then going to equanimity, that space. Wow. In a dominant culture that seems to be practicing polarization, right? Conversations on equanimity could be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sense that, instead of I'm right and you're wrong, it's like we may, we just see things differently from a different perspective, depending on our experiences in our life. And what I'm thinking is really basically only my opinion. So not holding yourself above another is another aspect of equanimity. One teacher, a Buddhist teacher, once was teaching about pride, and he said there's this pride that thinks I'm much better than this person, I'm way up higher. And then another kind of pride says, well, this other guy's pretty good, but I'm still just a little bit better. And then another one says, oh, we're equal, but I'm just a little tiny bit better than the other one. So this subtle pride, we always think that our opinions are just a little bit more right than another, but having a sense of equanimity about our opinions and what another person is expressing. Now, if you see a major flaw in their reasoning, you can't just go after them, right? People have to come to the realization themselves. So you can provide the conditions for them through your example, through how you talk about things. But if you go by attacking, that never works. So, yeah.
Important words for our world today. So thank you, Jan, for being with us. I think we're going to wrap it up here. We're very close to 8:45. Thank you all for being with us this morning. I really encourage you to utilize these recordings for your own benefit, but also to share with others. It could be a whole series that you utilize at work or in your gathering, your congregation. Talk about an easy resource, right? To utilize. Watch 10, 15 minutes within one of these recordings and have a conversation around it. So we've been creating together a lovely resource bank. We really have. So thank you, Jan, for adding to that bank.
Thank you, Ann.
For investing your time and your patience with us. And I hope to see you all next weekend. I encourage you to look through Dream Week events to see if anything resonates with you, and I encourage you to attend. And next week, we'll kind of roll up our sleeves a little bit and look at some real examples in our world and how what we've been learning together speaks to that. So I look forward to next Thursday. It's beautiful outside. Stay warm when it gets cold, and seriously consider becoming a warming space for others during the cold that's coming up. And we'll see you soon. Have great days.